I think one of the things I really love about David Fincher, first of all, is it took me a while to kind of admit that I love David Fincher. His work really did kind of sneak up on me, and I realized that, you know, he was a filmmaker who warranted closer attention than I was initially willing to give him, but he's also a filmmaker whose work usually, at its best, when it was really working, was not work that revealed everything about itself on one viewing at all. You had to go back and watch it over and over again. Now, the other thing I like about David Fincher is that he has an unusual, I think, skill as a filmmaker for a contemporary Hollywood filmmaker. It's his attraction to material which is really, in many ways, rooted in the 40s film noir or the old films of Alfred Hitchcock.
Ladies and gentlemen, we have ourselves a homicide.
He initially kind of indulged his ambitions to be in filmmaking through the courtesy of a neighbor of his in Marin County, California. He lived almost next door to George Lucas. And so Lucas knew this kid, and later on, Fincher had apparently seen Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid on television when he was like 7 or 8, and decided at that age what he wanted to do was to make movies. And later on, when he was old enough, Lucas invited Fincher to take a job or two working in the special effects department of Industrial Light and Magic. But it was really as a music video director, especially through the 1990s, that Fincher's real visual gifts, at least, were recognized. There were few filmmakers working in the area of video production who were comparable in terms of the level of accomplishment. However, that doesn't get you very far when you get hired by a company like 20th Century Fox and they're asking you to direct something like Alien 3, which was Fincher's debut as a feature filmmaker. And by all accounts, probably most vocally Fincher's own, was an absolutely awful experience for the filmmaker, because the same kind of control that he had learned to exert over his music videos was not a level of control he could in any way exert over Alien 3. What the studio was looking for and what Fincher planned to do were not the same thing at all. And of course, the director since then has learned to make sure that he doesn't really work with anybody unless he's got more or less complete control over what he's doing, or there's a complete understanding. It broke down during the production of Alien 3.
What does it look like?
Horrible.
I have to see it.
Most of his movies, and certainly the most effective ones, are about menace. And they are about people kind of being lost in worlds where their sense of control is completely taken away from them. But it's usually more subtle than that. They're usually being manipulated in a particular way. They're usually going through an experience where they start to question their own perception of reality. So what Fincher is doing is he is trading on some very deep aspects of human behavior having to do with the lies that we tell ourselves, the fantasies that we have. And the other thing I came to appreciate about David Fincher that was not apparent to me when I was first watching his films is that what seems at first to be sometimes an almost transparent filmmaking style, and the very rare choice that he might make to move a camera or to cut to a close-up, what seemed to me initially a very kind of ordinary form of visual storytelling, I realized later on is not that at all. Fincher is always taking the least likely or expected route when it comes through getting his way through a scene visually.
I want you to do me a favor.
Yeah, sure.
I want you to hit me as hard as you can.
What?
I want you to hit me as hard as you can.
The moment where I kind of realized that maybe I had been sort of seriously underestimating this director is when I saw Fight Club on its release in 1999. Fight Club is, I mean, it's not a film that I love, and certainly not the first David Fincher film I would go back to, but it was the first David Fincher film that made me realize, no, this is somebody who is seeing things from a very particular perspective and also has a skill to work within the framework of a commercial movie with big movie stars and impose something very distinctive, maybe even personal on it. That was the one that really kind of made me think, you know, I think it's time to take this guy more seriously than I had been up until that point.
I feel a bit badly how we left it last time.
Me too.
One of the films that for me really indicates what an unusual and focused talent David Fincher is his version of The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo. Because that is a film that, by all accounts at that point, didn't really need to be made. Almost anybody at that point in time who wanted to read the book had read the book. The original Swedish version of the film had in fact done very well around the world, had only recently been released in North America, and so the idea that there was going to be a major studio version of The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo seemed to be a rather bizarre choice for Fincher, until you see the film and you realize that it is not just a better film than the first version of the film, it is a completely different film. And it is a completely different film about violence. It is a completely different film about the role of the outsider. It is a completely different film in terms of its interest in the relationship between Michael Blomkvist and Elizabeth Salander. But most importantly, it is a different film in terms of the world it creates.
I like working with you.
I like working with you too.
I think one of the things that attracts him to a script is if he imagines in his head that he can create a visual world out of it. I think he's thinking about the entire world. And that's why even when some of his films aren't all that great, and I would apply this to Alien 3, I would say Panic Room later on, not a terribly successful film, but what I do see at work in every single one of his films is I don't think he can enter into a film, enter into a story, unless he can imagine what the entire world and universe is. And the entire world visually in Girl with the Dragon Tattoo reinforces incredibly that sense of menace, almost this kind of apocalyptic sense of the world about to go up in flames, which of course is one of the great images in the film. And it's a great example of Fincher applying something to material that you might not otherwise think in any way. What's he doing there? Why would he be doing it? And you realize he just approached it as a story that had never been filmed before.